Hello and welcome to our brand new offering, Global Lens, which will analyze all the major geopolitical and economic developments and their impact on India. Over the next 30 minutes, we put the spotlight on all the top stories from around the world. I'm Parikshit, Luthra. These are the top headlines we're tracking. US President Donald Trump pushes back his 50% tariff deadline for the European Union by over a month till the 9th of July. The de-escalation comes after a call with the European Commission President. Global markets inch higher. President Trump says Russia's Putin has absolutely gone crazy and hints at possible new sanctions. This after Ukraine Zelensky questioned America's silence on Russian air raids targeting Ukrainian cities. Trump also says Zelensky is doing his country no favors by talking the way he does. Over 50 killed in Israeli air raids in Gaza on Monday alone. This includes an attack on a school-turned-shelter in Gaza City. Head of a US-backed Gaza aid group resigns after United Nations and traditional aid agencies refuse to cooperate with it. Our top story this evening, US President Donald Trump has backed down from his threat to impose 50% tariffs on goods from the European Union, giving the EU a breather. President Trump has extended the deadline for trade talks until the 9th of July, following what he describes as a very nice call with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Just last Friday, Trump had threatened to escalate his trade war with the bloc, saying negotiations were going nowhere. As EU-US tariff negotiations continue, French President Macron is in Hanoi, the first stop on his 6-day trip across Asia, which will also take him to Indonesia and Singapore. His visit to Vietnam saw a series of bilateral deals being signed, with Macron calling it a new page in the relationship. This comes close on the heels of a similar visit by Chinese President Xi Jinping last month, as Vietnam faces pressure from Washington to reduce its trade surplus with the United States. Meanwhile, India is stepping up its own trade diplomacy. CNBC TV18 has learned that India and the US are close to finalizing an interim trade agreement. Sources say a US delegation is likely to visit India in the coming weeks as negotiations gain momentum. As part of the possible deal, the US may partially exempt Indian goods from the current 26% reciprocal tariff and reduce them to 10%. It is also expected to allow zero-duty access on select product lines. That's not all. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal recently met with EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic. Both sides are aiming for an interim deal, likely to be structured in 2 phases. The EU is seeking tariff cuts on automobiles, medical devices, wines, spirits and meat, while India is pushing for lower duties on garments, pharmaceuticals, steel, petroleum and electrical machinery. Joining now to discuss all of this is Jaimini Bhagwati, former High Commissioner to UK. Ambassador Bhagwati, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Let me begin by asking you, how important is it actually for India to be nimble-footed when the global trade is getting rebalanced and so fast?
Well, first, you already mentioned what has happened in terms of President Trump's pronouncements, particularly with regard to Europe, as well as with regard to countries in Asia. I think there's a lot of turbulence here, and I'm talking in traveling by plane terms. So one needs to just take a step back to understand what's going on. We have a reasonably robust trade relationship, both with the US and with Europe. I think with the US, it's about 40 billion of US exports to India and about 90 billion of Indian exports to the US. I'm talking about goods here. And for Europe, I think the numbers are something like 52 billion euros exports of Europe to India and about 75 or so billion euros of Indian exports to Europe. Now, why did I mention these numbers? I mentioned these numbers to indicate that these are relatively small compared to even Vietnam's numbers with the 2 respective, I can't say nations, because in one case it is the US and in the other case it is the European Union. And China is, of course, in an altogether different league. We want to increase trade, both in goods and services. But I would think that right now, whatever negotiations our Commerce Minister is doing with the US, one has to tread with caution because President Trump is not known to be very consistent in his speech as well as in his actions. But longer term, we can think beyond the 4 years that President Trump is going to be there. So I would think that the US is obviously a great destination in terms of Indian goods, but we need to up the ante and we need to increase the amount of foreign direct investment. Unfortunately, even there, when President Trump says that we may impose a 25% tariff on Apple phones made in India. So that's what I mean by turbulence and uncertainty. Europe is much, much better. They are far more reliable. As you may know, trade is left entirely to the European Commission. On political and strategic matters, each of the European countries have the right to make their own policies. But trade is left to the trade commissioner, and above him is Ursula von der Leyen, former defense minister, I think, of Germany. So they take the final call. However, even in the case of Europe, since I was there in Brussels as India's ambassador to the EU, and we tried very hard for an agreement at that stage, we couldn't reach it for a variety of reasons, which are history now. But, after the European Commission has approved of a trade agreement, while trade has been handed over to the Commission, each and every government of the European Union, each and every member country's government will have to approve it separately. In some countries, like as in India, the government can approve. In some countries, not just the government, but the parliament, the national parliament has to approve. Then the European Parliament, which is headquartered in Strasbourg, has to approve. So it is a lengthy process. There's no way of shortening it. But I think Europe is a very, should I say, stable and a very reliable partner. So over time, Europe will be very important because I'm sure you know Europe without UK is about 450 million people, while the US is 350 million people, and they are at comparable per capita income. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. That brings me to my next question. So you're saying that in the long term, and this is also what we hear from the European Union officials, that they are here not just for a 1 or 2 year period. They're looking at something which serves the interests of EU as a bloc and India in the long term. So you feel that even if we sign an interim deal with them in the next 1 month or so, it's going to be beneficial for both the blocs in the long run?
No, absolutely. It will be beneficial, but I'm submitting that it cannot go into effect without all that process in Europe. Europe is slow, but sure and steady. So be aware that while we may sign anything with them right now, on our side, government can sign a trade agreement. It doesn't even have to go to parliament. That's not true of Europe. But I would suggest at this stage, instead of focusing way too much, I mean, for instance, we could get into CPTPP and why we should join it rather than because we did not join RCEP. But I would say take a step back and try to understand how we can increase our trade competitiveness. I will digress a little bit here, so please bear with me. The internal price of the rupee, Indian rupee, is the interest rate. The external price is the exchange rate. As far back as 2015, 10 years ago, I'd written a paper which looked at total factor productivity and so on. But our exchange rate at that stage, 2015, should have been somewhere around 95 or 96 rupees to the dollar. And right now, I think it should be somewhere around 103, 104 rupees to the dollar. Now, you'll be astonished and you'll say, my God, that sounds like a devaluation of the rupee. You don't devalue the rupee, you do it gradually over time. And 10 paisa in every couple of days and so on. So the markets are not hit with turbulence. But you cannot ask our exporters to fight with one hand tied behind their backs. And a good friend of mine who used to be an editor in one of the pink newspapers, the other day told me, we were chatting. So he said, no, we have a very our exchange rate is at the right level. And there is no reason to feel that it is undervalued or overvalued. I think it is overvalued. So I said, well, then in that case, open the capital account. Let's see just where the rupee happens to go. Because as we both know, the capital account is closed for all practical purposes. Yes, for education, for travel, etc. But you can't sell a house and take all the money out at one go. So, for a country with a closed capital account for most purposes, you have arrived at an exchange rate which is very detrimental to our exporters. So I would submit that we need to also look at our macro fundamentals, even as we work hard to arrive at trade agreements, whether it is with Europe, whether it is with the US, or whether it is the CPTPP. I refer to CPTPP, and people can look that up on the internet to know the full form and who are the members. I think there are about 16 members. It doesn't include China. And so it's Japan, Australia, countries that we can do business with. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. So, Ambassador Bhagwati, that's a very important point that you mentioned about exchange rate, because a lot of exporters have been talking about that from time to time. What I would also like to ask you, how do you think India is poised to benefit from the current trading relationships around the world? Things are changing very fast. Do you feel there are certain sectors in India which have a right to win? And with these trade deals with the UK, with European Union and the US, we are going to see growth in exports in those sectors. Would you be able to list some of them?
Yeah, I'm sure I can list some. But before I get that, you have a very correct point that we need to increase our exports, not just because it's good for the exporter, but it also leads to employment generation. So I would look, you're familiar with government's various programs to promote investment. But we also need, everything, unfortunately, is long-term. We need to improve how well our workers are qualified to be able to attract investments. Unfortunately, right now, foreign investments tend to go to the south of the vineyards because they find that the workers are better able to quickly understand how to implement whatever instructions they are given. So one of the things that government can do is try and encourage more companies abroad who are looking to divest out of China for whatever reason, because China is not just a political issue, it's also an issue of workers' compensation in terms of salaries and so on. As you know, even before Trump came to power, China was moving some of its production to Vietnam. And that's because the salaries in Vietnam are lower than in China. And right now, salaries in India are lower than in Vietnam. So if we are looking to move to export manufactured items, because unlike services, services is a great thing. Pharmaceuticals exports are a great thing. We do both of them, and we do them in large quantities, and they bring in significant amounts of foreign exchange into our country. But unfortunately, services is not employment intensive. We have not cracked the manufacturing nut. By that, I do not mean that we don't manufacture anything, but we have not become a manufacturing hub, which we could have given our low salary levels across the board in most of the country.
All right. Thank you so much, Ambassador Bhagwati, for joining us with that very strong and holistic perspective of where we stand on trade right now and how these trading relationships will actually be beneficial for us. But there's a lot that India needs to do for export competitiveness as well. Thank you once again for being with our debut show, Global Lens, here on CNBC TV18 Prime. Let's move on and get you more international news now. Donald Trump has demanded that Harvard University disclose names and nationalities of foreign students. Trump added that it was a reasonable request, as the US administration has given the university billions of dollars. This comes after a federal judge blocked Trump administration's ban on Harvard's enrollment of foreign students. Moving on, Iran says it will not suspend its uranium enrichment program to secure a nuclear deal with the United States. A statement from Tehran ahead of its 6th round of Oman-mediated talks with the US raises concerns that Iran may be ready to walk away without a deal if necessary. Containers from a capsized Liberian ship carrying oil and hazardous chemicals have washed ashore in Kerala's Kollam. The Kerala government has issued evacuation orders for parts of the district's coastal areas. The government has told the public to stay away from the beached containers. The cargo ship, which was on its way to Kochi, sank after encountering heavy weather. Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif met Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan in Istanbul over the weekend. Sharif thanked Turkey for its support during the military confrontation with India. The two leaders also reviewed their bilateral ties and agreed to take steps to achieve $5 billion annual bilateral trade. Thousands of Americans remember George Floyd 5 years after he was killed by a police officer. The death of Floyd, an African-American man, on May 25, 2020, triggered nationwide protests against racism and police brutality. Sweden-based automaker Volvo Cars has said that it would cut nearly 3,000 jobs as part of a major cost-cutting drive. The firm added that the 3,000 job cuts would primarily impact office-based positions in Sweden and represent around 15% of the firm's total office-based workforce. Chinese car maker BYD saw its shares tumble after it announced heavy discounting to boost sales and volumes. It has announced price cuts of up to 35% on its electric and plug-in hybrid cars. The market fears that these discounts will weigh on the company's margins. Oracle will spend around $40 billion on NVIDIA's higher performance chips, this in a bid to power OpenAI's new US data center. The cloud service provider will buy around 400,000 of NVIDIA's most powerful GB200 chips and lease the computing power to OpenAI. The data center is expected to be fully operational by mid next year, and Oracle has agreed to lease the site for 15 years. Coming up, we put the spotlight on India's trade ties with Australia and bring you all the trending stories from around the world. We're back in just 2 minutes with a conversation with the Australian ambassador and cricketing legend Steve Waugh. Don't go anywhere. Let's shift focus to India-Australia ties now. The trade relations between the two countries continue to grow. As of FY24, bilateral trade stood at $24 billion. Both nations are also working on a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement. And as one partnership continues, so does the greatest rivalry on the field of cricket. Indian cricket team will play Australia between October and November as part of the Summer of Cricket 2025-2026 season. Joining me now are two very special guests. Australian High Commissioner to India, Philip Green. Green is an Australian diplomat with experience in 4 continents. We also have with us Australian cricketing legend Steve Waugh. He played an iconic role in Australia's rise as a dominant team. As captain, he led the Australian team to victory in the 1999 Cricket World Cup. Post-retirement, Waugh also served as Australia's tourism ambassador to India. In 2020, Waugh went on for a photo expedition to India and released a book with his favourite clicks. Thank you very much for being with us, gentlemen. Ambassador Green, if I can begin with you. You're launching the 25-26 Summer of Cricket. Could you give us a sense of how big this extravaganza is going to be?
Oh, it's huge, Parikshit. I mean, you know, last year we had a great year with the Border Gavaskar series and would have been harder to best that. But today, this year, we're going to have the Indian men's team out for a T20 and one-day series, followed by the iconic Ashes series with the English, and then the Indian women team are coming later in the season. So it really doesn't get much better than that. We're very, very excited about the cricket in Australia this summer.
Right. And to get you in, Steve, you've moved on, transitioned from the role of a sportsperson to an ambassador for sports to an advisory role at the Centre for Australia-India Relations. Could you give us a sense of what your new role is all about and how you plan to contribute to India-Australia relations?
Yeah, look, I've just stepped into the role, so I see it as a natural progression. I've been coming to India since 1986. I've seen many changes over that period of time. The relationship between Australia and India has always been strong, continues to grow, and I just hopefully can play my part in developing future and potential partnerships between Australia and India. And it's a country I love, and we have so many similarities, and obviously cricket joins us together. But more than that, there's great business opportunities, and we want to strengthen that relationship between Australia and India, and hopefully I can play my part in that team.
Right. So we've got lots to ask you on the cricketing side of things. But one quick question, Ambassador Green, when it comes to bringing our economies together, cricket plays a big role. Could you give us a sense of the kind of tourist inflows, the kind of business revenues they're expecting for Australia through this cricketing season, especially coming from India?
Well, of course, Indians are passionate about cricket, and many of them want to see the MCG, they want to see the Sydney Cricket Ground, they want to see our players and yours in these iconic venues. We think that's a huge opportunity on what is already a very strong business relationship. So the message that we are giving to the Indian business fraternity tonight is to say, you know, come for the cricket, spend 2 or 3 days at your favourite ground. Let's see how Australia and India go. Come for the cricket, but stay for the business. There are many fields in which Australia and Indian business are thriving. You mentioned tourism, which is a wonderful opportunity for both of our countries, really. Indians are now the 5th largest source country for tourism in Australia, and might surprise you, they now spend as much per visit as the Japanese do. And you might surprise you also to find that Australians are the 5th largest source country for Indian tourism. Australians love India and enjoy all parts of your country. So there's huge opportunity here, and what we're trying to get everyone to think about is come for the cricket, but stay for the business.
Right. I would also like to ask you, Ambassador, when it comes to two-way trade, what is the kind of trade figures you're expecting for 2025, and where are we with the CECA? Because clearly the progress has been delayed.
Well, we think there is huge opportunity between Australia and India, and let me explain why. So India is growing at 6 or 7% per annum. It's the fastest growing large economy in the world. And every economy in the world ought to be interested in India. But in Australia, we're a bit special. We're a neighbour, we're a strategic partner, but also we're a very complementary economy to India's. We provide many of the things that India will need for the next generation of its economic growth, from its energy needs to its critical mineral needs as India seeks to become a major producer of electric vehicles and batteries, but also the skills and education that India needs in order to maximise the value out of its demographic dividend. So we think the opportunities are great. Things are going well. Let me give you one statistic. So India's exports to the world in the last 5 years have gone up 35%. But India's exports to Australia have gone up 67%, nearly twice as fast. As for CECA, you know that we already have the first phase of a free trade agreement. We are very keen, now that our government has been re-elected, to re-engage and try to get that deal done as quickly as we can, because there is huge complementary opportunity between Australia and India, and the faster we can remove barriers to trade, the faster it will grow.
Right. Steve, to get you in on all the cricketing developments taking place currently, you have followed developments about Rohit Sharma, Virat Kohli announcing retirement from Test cricket. Shubman Gill has been appointed as the Test captain. What do you feel about the move?
Yep. Well, I think it's a good move for Indian cricket. Shubman Gill, a younger player, but he's done very well playing for India. He's a quality batsman. He seems a natural leader. He's the next generation, so I think it's a good move for India. Obviously, it's a big change. Rohit Sharma not being there, Virat Kohli, 2 previous captains, legends of the game, incredible players, particularly Virat, up there with Sachin Tendulkar and Sunil Gavaskar. You know, those sort of players don't come along very often. So he'll have a challenge, but I guess he gets to, Shubman Gill gets a chance to shape the team in his own way, his own fashion. It's a beginning of a new era. There's lots of talent in Indian cricket, so there's no reason why he shouldn't be successful. But I think from an Indian point of view, you've got to have a bit of patience, give him some opportunities to learn as a captain. It's a big step up from being one of the players to then leading your country, particularly as 1.5 billion people supporting him and wanting him to do well. There's lots of pressure, so he'll need to grow into the job, but I think he's the right choice.
Right. Who would be your favorite Indian player of all times?
That's a tough question. I mean, I started my career against people like Kapil Dev and Sunil Gavaskar, and obviously played against the great Indian sides when I was captain, probably the best Indian batting side of all time with, Tendulkar and Dravid and Laxman and Ganguly and players like that. So, I respected all those guys, and then Javagal Srinath and so many good players. Harbhajan Singh pretty much single-handedly won the Test Series in 2001. So lots of amazing players, but I think the guy I probably respect most in the Indian cricket is Rahul Dravid. He was sort of the bedrock of the Indian side, the foundation, and probably played a low-key role behind someone like Sachin Tendulkar, who's obviously an iconic player, but Dravid was the guy that India could always rely on.
Right. Often a lot is spoken about your rivalry with Sourav Ganguly, especially what happened in the 2001 Test Series when he made you wait for the toss. How did you feel at that time, and how have things been between both of you since then?
Oh, we've always been fine. It hasn't been a problem. It's gamesmanship. I think Sourav was late for the first toss. I think might have been in Calcutta, and then thought it was a pretty good idea to continue that. So I guess that's gamesmanship. It didn't worry me. It didn't faze me too much. It's all part of the game, and it didn't sort of affect the outcome of the Test Series. We played some great matches against each other, have a competitive rivalry, but we've got that respect for each other. Was an outstanding player for India, a very good captain. So we get on fine. There's no problem there.
All right. Your favourites for this IPL season, 2025?
I sort of get bits and pieces of the IPL. It's on sort of the wrong time for us to watch in Australia. But yeah, look, it's been exciting. Watching a 14-year-old score a century is something that, if you said that was going to happen, people would say that that's not possible. It's not achievable. So for someone to do that is probably the most incredible moment probably in IPL history. For a 14-year-old, basically young boy to score 100 off something like 30 balls, that's something you dream of. So that to me has been the highlight of the IPL season. Right.
And Steve, the final question to you. One favourite player from Australia, one from India for the upcoming series, upcoming matches between the two countries. Who would those be?
It's always hard to pick a favourite. I think people I really enjoy watching would be Travis Head. I think he's really come of age as a player in the Australian side. Someone who was in and out of the teams for a long while now. He's one of the first players picked. He's exciting to watch. He can win games. He's a crowd favourite. So for me, Travis Head from the Australian team. India, look, I'm expecting Shubman Gill to really step up to the plate now that he's been named captain. An exciting player at all formats of the game, has amazing talent, and as we've mentioned before, Bumrah is a once-in-a-generation bowler, so he's a match winner for India. So there's some of the players that stand out to me that people want to go and watch play, and they have a huge influence on the outcome of the game.
All right, Steve Waugh and Ambassador Philip Green for joining us on India-Australia business ties and cricketing ties as well. Let's move on. It's time now for our segment on the stories that are trending on the internet. President Donald Trump defends his trade policy, says US is not looking to make T-shirts or sneakers, but instead wants to focus on the big things like making tanks and computer chips. A video of French President Emmanuel Macron's wife pushing him in the face as they disembarked from the plane in Vietnam went viral on social media. Macron's office rejected speculation that she shoved him and said that they were just joking and teasing each other. Hawaii's Kilauea volcano has erupted once again. As per the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, it spewed lava up to 1,000 feet in height. That's almost the height of the Eiffel Tower. The volcano began to erupt in December 2024, and the activity has continued sporadically ever since. Two humanoid robots traded punches inside a boxing ring, amusing fans in China's Guangzhou. Human operator teams were seen controlling the bots in competitive bouts. The robotic fighters, developed by Unitary Robotics, showcased several combat skills. They even regained their footing after knockdowns. Disney's live-action Lilo and Stitch remake cruised past Tom Cruise's Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, in a record-breaking weekend at the box office. Lilo and Stitch's collections exceeded $340 million globally, while the 8th film in the Mission Impossible franchise raked in $190 million. Kush Maini becomes the first Indian to win a Formula 2 race at the Monaco Grand Prix. The 25-year-old converted pole position into a win at the reverse grid sprint race. He stood at the top of the podium singing the Indian national anthem as Monaco's iconic street circuit became a witness to the moment. On the final cut, Rafael Nadal's record at the French Open remains unmatched, earning him the title the King of Clay. He was honored at the Roland Garros in one of the most heartwarming moments in tennis history.
Tennis is just a game.